What's going on? Is it going?
Yes.
What is it he said in the X-Files? Some snapping on the latex? Just Scully?
I think that's what he said, yes.
You're kind of far away.
I know. I'm getting closer. I'm getting there. Hello, everyone. Come say hello. We're going to work on a... Don't start right away. Let them get involved here. Ooh, oh, what's under here? Ah!
Just one
of the drawers of stuff. I don't know what is in there. Sponges and...
graphite.
More sponges. At one point, it was all organized. Brushes. More brushes. Coffee. Gotta have coffee.
Yoink.
Oh, you stole my coffee. Actually, it wasn't my coffee. So, hello, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. I want to set up right. Do you have...
There's a straw in there.
Why is there a straw? It's probably a bad thing. I think that's the camera part.
So...
buttons. So...
I keep telling everybody that we were going to do a graphite thing, so that's what we're doing.
All right. Give them a minute to jump on here.
Yeah.
So you have powdered graphite, which is in your box.
In here, which as you can kind of tell, there's a lot of graphite in there. It's a
just
mixture of the Cretacolor graphite and generals.
Mixture of the two.
Yeah. So, sorry.
This is your nice standing desk.
This one? Yeah. It's just
It's actually a shipping desk.
it's a
from
U-line shipping
Uline.
desk that I got because they're super sturdy and super tough, and they're metal, so I can use magnetic stuff to hold stuff up if I want, which I do.
Yes.
So
you are going to.
what?
We're
We've been talking about doing the graphite wash.
Yes.
And so this is an 11 by 14 piece of clayboard.
Yes.
Ampersand clayboard. That I was going to do the preliminary thing on, and then shouldn't take very long to do this, and then we can just move over there and I can draw on what's over there after because this, I can either dry it, which will take time, or let it dry and just work on the one I have over there. It's the same stuff.
Yeah.
So, and I actually remembered to put on gloves this time.
Actually, latex gloves.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is the responsible thing to, because then you don't have to, especially when we're taping, when we're recording, then I don't have to go and wash my hands and spend 10 minutes doing that.
People from Australia and Indonesia say hello.
Oh, awesome.
Arizona.
Everywhere. That's awesome.
Everywhere.
Well, not everywhere, but otherwhere.
Other places, yes.
Yeah.
Wait, we have the box of, and these are just brushes.
These are just different brushes that I've kind of specifically pulled out. They're kind of different sizes, and I'm really rough on these brushes, but the thing is that the more rough you are, the more fibrous the brushes become.
Yes.
And the more marks they make when you lay down the wet graphite.
Ah.
So you can do it smoothly or uniformly, and there's a place for that. But a lot of times what I like to do is make a, big, messy gestural stuff and then pick at it and see what comes out of it.
Oh.
And that helps when things, like you'll see me grab the brush and just jam it onto the board and move it around. So I don't, this actually at one point was an expensive brush, I think.
Oh, no, don't tell me
but
that.
it only became this brush after I'd used it in other places for a while.
So we have Spain and Kansas and
awesome.
Portland and Utah, and everyone's telling us where they're from. Hello.
Oh, hello. I like hearing that, actually.
I know.
It makes me feel a little global when I can hear
Absolutely
communicate with people.
Yes.
So.
Then we can talk and one of those sill putties are not going to be used for anything.
This is not for this. This is stuff I use for something else. We can do at a different point. That's for making textural stamps for graphite, which is a different thing.
Eat your dinner.
She's actually talking to a kid, not me. So I usually will get the brush it already has a lot of graphite in it, but it's not enough to...
That is just water.
This is just water, which instantly turns black as soon as I put the brush in it, but that doesn't really matter in the end.
We got Chile and Orlando and Argentina.
Wow, that's cool.
North Carolina and Belarus. Denver. We're going to pay attention. Keep.
All right, so I just get a lot of graphite on here. Can you see?
Yep, I got it.
And I start kind of doing this onto the board, just making some textural stuff. And the more water you put in, the smoother it'll start to appear. But then when it dries, it does this kind of beading, which starts to look like, if you've ever looked down from an airplane and seen a landscape and mountain ranges as they bead off. I mean, kind of taper off into the. It kind of looks like that from above. Yeah. So I like using the ampersand because it's a very sturdy surface, and many times I'll go back over this. I'll do this 2 or 3 different times. Sometimes I get lucky, and I can, within the first 5 or 10 minutes, I'll get a textural pattern that I like. Very often, I'll get a third of the way into something and then destroy it.
Wash them.
You know.
Make sure you wash them.
So and then have to destroy it because it's not moving in the direction I want it to. This is definitely a process if you're into exploration. Not so much a process until you get used to doing it a lot. You're going to find it difficult to control what you're going to do until you know what it'll do for you. Right. And for me, it's like there's a lot of different stuff I like to see in it, and play with. I don't know if
Everyone's like, what are you doing?
Well, this is mark making on top of other marks, and sometimes I'll let stuff stand. Like if I stopped right here, I could probably find enough in this. If I dry it, which I can do with I have a hot air gun, which actually dries it and evaporates the water pretty quickly. What you see here is high contrast. When I dry it, it lowers the contrast a little bit, and then when I polish off the loose graphite, that makes it even lower because then you're getting basically a graphite powder scrubbed onto the surface. But all of this stuff that you see here, you will see. It'd be hard to see it on the camera, but I mean, again, in the video. But it's still present even when you can barely see it, like on the recording.
John says, "How well does the clayboard accept the graphite?"
Well, it accepts it pretty well. I mean, you can draw on it. It's a little like drawing on a slightly polished surface, so you have to work with it a lot. It's not like as easy as drawing on paper in terms of just putting a mark down. But once you learn to work with it and you realize its level of difficulty, I guess you could say, becomes a part of your process, then you can kind of ignore that part.
Right.
It's not. I won't ever say this is the easiest thing to work on. But the thing is that it offers different results than working on other things. If this were gesso board, it would be a little bit like this, but there are different qualities to it.
Right. Yes.
And it's harder to erase on gesso board because it's more porous.
Right.
This stuff if I want to take this, like I've said this before, if I want to take this all the way back to white, I can do that with these Mr. Clean Magic Eraser sponges that you get at grocery stores for cleaning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's the ones that don't have the foam soap in it. It's the original kind.
No.
You can cut that into shapes and pull out like very, very white details. Rubber kneaded erasers work on it very well. And abrasive erasers work on it for pinpoints, but you have to continuously clean the abrasive eraser as you do it.
Right. Or it'll get all smudgy.
Electric erasers, you can take it back to a white, almost a pure white too. But see how it's already starting to dry. I don't know if you can tell it's already drying over here.
If I stop enough.
And if you look over here, it's even more contrasty. So one of the things I've started doing recently is drying this, brushing off a little bit of loose graphite, then scanning it so I can actually use the textural pattern if I ever need to do a digital piece. So I can bring this kind of a quality into the digital work that I do for some publication stuff as well.
Oh, very cool. I'm in a white shirt too.
Yeah, that was a poor choice.
That was a poor choice.
That is one of the reasons why I wear all black.
Yeah. The graphite.
So I'm going to use the hot air gun to dry it up a bit so you can see it.
And all right, and if you can, I can't translate any other languages, so I don't know anything but English. So
if anybody sees something that's posted in a language that you can translate for us, we wouldn't mind it if you would repost the question so that we could get it.
Right.
Until they come up with a cool translation program app for us.
Well, they don't have it on everything else. Twitter and Facebook.
So this is a hot air gun, and you can use a hair dryer, which is it takes a little bit longer because it doesn't get as hot. But then again, if you stay on one spot with this thing for too long, it'll boil the paper.
Yes.
It'll boil the board.
Yes.
And make bubbles.
Which you did on that one.
Which I've done before.
Yeah.
And I just use it because I can in my own work. but it's not something that I like to have happen a lot because it is that's definitely something that stands out on the surface.
Right. He said the hardest part, Don said the hardest part for me is the subtle erasing to build form, or maybe not patient enough.
Oh, it does take a while.
Yeah, you have to be very patient.
I can do an 11 by 14 piece of a central figure in a day or two with some, with some realism. But if I dig into the whole thing and want to do a complete, fully framed piece, drawing out that takes a while. Yeah.
And Camerucci said, "How did you learn this technique to draw on clapboard?"
So I experiment a lot with different things, and I just sort of started experimenting one day with powdered graphite, and then I said, well, I want to bring more gestural stuff into it, so I started using water and graphite. There have been other people that have done powdered graphite with water before, and probably people that have done it on clapboard before. I mean, I'm not aware of them. That doesn't mean they're not out there, and that, but I come to a lot of things naturally through experimentation.
Right. We had the clapboard, we had the graphite.
Right. And what was funny was the clapboard was actually an accidental purchase at one point because I was using gesso board and then ended up getting some clapboard to try drawing on. And then I had that laying around for a while because a lot of times I'll buy something and not pick it up for a year or two until I'm ready to play with it. And then I just started experimenting on it. Now, some people use alcohol with graphite powder because it evaporates faster. But
and you can see the contrast is...
Yeah. The contrast after it dries gets dull, and then after I polish it, a lot of the white will disappear.
I think some people forget the burnishing it part.
Well, and that definitely makes it a more uniform surface to work on, like you're working on a uniform background.
Right.
But all that stuff will still be hinted at in there, and it's those hints that make your mind see things, right?
Right.
It's the Rorschachian element.
Yeah, they're throwing out what they see already.
So one thing I could do right now if I wanted to, I could take this and spray fix it, and then put a crystal clear, like a varnish on top of it, and then I could literally paint on top of it, and just obscure what I don't want, and then reinforce what I do, which is another way of doing it. And but usually if I want to work with the graphite, I leave it like this for a while. But I started polishing it just because I like having kind of a consistent surface. Because at different points, if you have a lot of piles of graphite, like what these real black parts are, is just a pile of graphite that's dried on the surface. That's going to come off. Most likely, it'll like the darkest darks will come off. But then again, once you get to a point when you're finished with it and you spray it again,
yes, with
the varnish, a lot of this stuff goes back to even darker than it was.
What spray fixative do you like?
Well, you can use a regular, any brand of like the matte spray fixatives will work just to keep it from moving.
The matte ones?
Well, that's if you just want to keep it from moving.
Okay.
If you want to give it that kind of rich quality that I was talking about, then you want to use like a gloss crystal clear, like spray acrylic gloss.
Well, once you use a gloss, you don't use a pencil with it, right?
Once it's done, you can't do any. Once you put the gloss acrylic on it, you don't really work unless you're going to work on top of that in oil. Right. You can't really go back into it with pencil anymore. So.
How is the hair dryer so quiet? It's not a hair dryer; it is a heat gun.
Yeah, this is just a.
It's like a 20-year-old heat gun.
We got this for when we used to shrink wrap pieces of art, and this thing will actually get up to what does it say, 1100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes. Not anything to be messed with.
You can start a fire with these things almost. But you could use a really nice, a good hair dryer. Obviously you're going to get graphite on it, but that'll work too.
Wherever our hair dryer, we do have.
I do have a hair dryer that I use for it. Luckily, I have tiles on part of my floor, so I just lay it on the floor and let it cool down, and it's okay. So I also keep a brush that doesn't get wet when I do this. So that what I'll do now is I'll go through and start to kind of push off the loose graphite. Can you see it when I do that?
Oh yeah. You can see the little puffs of air.
So if you notice, this stuff here starts to come up. The darkest parts start to come up. Yeah. And that'll pretty much all go back to a darker dark once it gets varnished at the end. I call it the varnish. It's basically spray acrylic seal.
Okay.
And I'm making kind of a circular kind of a gesture like this. So I'm trying not to scrub it in yet. I want to get as much of the graphite off before I start polishing it.
Yeah. Okay. How do you keep full contrast but avoid the glossy finish?
you can use a matte, like a spray matte fixative on it at the end, and it won't be glossy. I mean, it'll just be like a normal drawing that you've spray fixed. There's probably going to be a little more gloss than you used to because the board is so smooth anyway. But it's just a regular spray varnish at the end will work too. So, and that won't give you like an oil paint varnish.
So for your pieces like Hyrayeth and the Storms and everything, you do this technique.
I usually make it more dense. Yeah.
Right. Then you'll do what you're doing now.
Yeah. Basically.
And then you'll burnish it, which is rubbing the graphite in.
Yeah. Burnish or polish, whatever you want to call it.
Burnish or polish it in, and then you will go without doing anything to the surface. You go back into it with pencil, correct?
Right. After I polish it, that's when I start working into it with pencil.
Why not tip it over when getting the graphite off?
Oh, I will. It's just that the more time I'm doing it fast right now for the video, but yeah, you can do it more like this if you want, and get more of it off without it staying on the board. But eventually, I was going to do that as well. But I'm sort of shortening the process a little bit just for the.
This is clay board. Someone asked what board it was.
So, like I said, the contrast will.
Why are you brushing it off versus blowing it off?
Because it won't actually just blow off.
No, that's
once it's loose. Once it's loose, it'll blow off. Yeah, you can blow it off like that. But see, that doesn't. Also, you breathe in a lot more dust that way.
That is true. You should have.
Normally, my fan is on a little bit higher so that the dust actually is pushed down. And you got to be careful if there's water too, because that got wet and the brush got wet a little bit.
Oh, it did.
So, and that'll make another mark, which at this stage it's not really that big of a deal.
Remember, there's no right or wrong way to do it. If you guys tip it off or blow it off or do whatever, it's just.
So, if I just do it without doing this part though, and I started polishing it or burnishing it right away, it would get much darker than it will now. As it is right now, it's going to go to kind of a pale gray, I guess, is what it looks like. This is still pretty dark for what as I normally start with, but this still gives you a lot if you could look into it. All that stuff is still in there. It's just lighter now and it's harder to see. And now this is where I go back in though. This is where you make kind of your, to me, is where I make my kind of artistic decisions about what I want to keep, what I want to emphasize, and what I want to get rid of. And that just comes with exploring what's going to come out of this when I get to that point.
Yeah, look at that. That's really nice right in there.
So this is where it still looks like the edge of a landscape moving into water or something. All
right, there's some more questions. Can you do this on anything else besides clayboard? It doesn't act the same.
It doesn't act exactly the same. You can do it on a really well-polished gesso board as well, as long as you've gotten a really good sanded surface really well. The more porous the material, the harder it will be to lift up the graphite once it's on. And paper, unless you get a really smooth, like a really tough, smooth watercolor paper. I've done it on Fabriano hot press.
But it's different though.
It never comes up as white, but you can still work with it. That's what the Gate of Fire piece is on Fabriano, and I put all that on with wet graphite.
That's true. But it isn't that white glow. It doesn't get that white.
No, but glow. You can still, any glow on a piece is determined by how you control your own values and white points. So you could do this, I could do this piece starting with,
that was an important note.
Starting with a pretty dark piece, but as long as I controlled all my values properly, I could still make parts of it glow, So
there should be an asterisk right there. Yeah. Do you ever put, someone asked, do you ever put varnish straight over it without removing the powder like that?
Actually, I did do that. I have done it. What happens is where it's thin already becomes kind of glossy, and where it's thick becomes matte. So you end up with this glossy and matte piece, which is really cool. Try it sometime. Yeah. I try to encourage people to do as much experimentation with it as you can. Find out what its limitations and your limitations for what you want are involved in the process. Because some people who like to work very, very tight sometimes find this to be a maddening process because it's really sometimes difficult. I have been able to push it towards tight stuff because I'm so comfortable now with the hard part of it, which is that there's a lot of things that I really have to force to happen in this board, whereas other things are more forgiving. This board is less forgiving of certain things. Like once you've established a background on this, you can't sketch on top of it.
Right.
Because if you sketch and you have to erase, that's just going to lift up all the graphite underneath it too.
Yeah, it's gone.
So what you have to end up doing if you want something precise on it is putting in your textural
figuring
pattern, figuring out the actual image on another piece of paper,
to lay it over,
transferring it either through a projection process or some form of transfer process on the top. You can maybe use white the white transfer paper, the Serral white to do that, or you can look at your drawing and try to freehand it if you're real confident in freehanding stuff.
Right.
You know, so.
What techniques do you use mostly? Cross hatching, and which one do you offer to make more realistic? Which do you think is?
To me, the scale of the piece determines what kind of technique makes it realistic. You can do a very realistic piece with cross hatching if you're looking at it from 10 feet away.
Right.
If you're doing something this close to you, that tends to be more of a pointillistic, sharp edge of the pencil kind of blending and technique. But it's one of the things you notice about impressionistic paintings is that some of them appear to be photographs from across the room, and then you get up close to them, and then the technique starts to unfold in front of you. Same thing with any drawing. I mean, it depends on where you're going to look at it from and how close. Like small pieces like this, I tend to use a lot of pointillism and a lot of solid shading, like so you don't see a lot of line work, unless the edge of a line or something will read as a shape, right? Because
someone asked if you use a dusk mash when brushing out the graphite. Yes.
Yeah, you should, especially if you don't have a fan on top of you, because I have an overhead fan that usually is turned on higher, but I have it off right now so you can hear better.
Yes.
And it pushes everything down into the sides. You should use a dust mask. Breathing graphite, it can give you you can get like lung problems if you breathe too much of it. It's like breathing anything.
Hold on, before you go and burnish it off.
So even now you can still see more than you will after I burnish it. Once I burnish it, it'll start to look almost like a uniform piece of toned paper with that's unevenly toned. But in person, you look at it from multiple angles and you can pick out all the details are still in there that were there from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. To stop and slow down, or they just blur.
Somebody asked if we'd seen Heredity. I haven't seen it yet.
No. I
do like horror movies, though, and I will see it. All right, so this is what happened when you lift up. I usually polish it so much that it almost graphite doesn't get off on your hands anymore when you put them down on the piece. So, and I can get it. I usually will also take it darker than this, but I kind of like the textures and stuff. And this is a higher key than normal for me. This would end up being probably a higher key piece in terms of light. I do like doing them much darker sometimes and doing low key drawings on it, so that it's just the edges of whites and things are showing. So you can do almost a minimalist representation of. You can do almost a photorealistic representation on when you get it down low key. Up this high, it's more of a textural exploration.
How much comes off in there now? See. It's still getting some.
So, and these rags, these are shop rags that I got like at Lowe's in a pack. They're 8-pound bags for like, I don't know, like $10, but they can be washed, and I just keep moving it to a clean area. So, it's essentially what it boils down to is making kind of a toned paper that has indications and gesture marks laid into it. Or maybe it's like working on marbled paper, if you've ever painted on marbled paper, which,
Shoshan asked, what would you use for highlight after drawing on the surface? This is the point you were making earlier.
So you control your highlights just like you would on a regular drawing. So if you imagine that this is as high as it'll go, then everything else has to go darker to make the values look right. But with an eraser, with the Mr. Clean Magic eraser sponges, kneaded erasers, and then the hard erasers that I use, you can pull this back to white.
So the white is your highlight.
The white of the board can be your highest point, in the piece. Or you can paint on top of it, and then obviously you want whatever the paint is to be your highest point, because the white of the board won't really work very well with a painted on white because it's a different value. It's a different
right. You don't use that.
No,
you don't.
I usually don't use the white of the board unless it's just going to stay a drawing. And then, I'll do it like most of the drawings pieces that are done just with graphite. The white of the board is the white.
Is the highlight.
But I don't usually have much of that showing because I want the highlights to be very few and far between, and I pick them very, very carefully, when I'm working, because I don't want there to be too many highlights or it destroys the illusion of depth.
Very good. Should I adopt a hairless cat? No, we have the hairiest room in this house is his studio, which is funny.
You know what? I think that hairless cats are hard to find and adopt.
I know.
I think that if you could adopt a hairless cat, sure.
Yeah.
Why not? But
they're expensive too, man.
I would adopt the cat that looks like nobody else wants it, because that one is the one that needs you the most.
I know. We dropped off the food this week to to the animal shelter.
But that's just my opinion. But you did ask.
No, Maeve and I dropped her food off at the animal shelter this week, and you would not believe how many black kittens and dogs are there because people don't want to adopt black
Because
cats
they don't
and
photograph
dogs.
well.
I don't know. That's what I've heard, but they were the cutest things.
Now I'm going to pick up a cleaner one, and I'll show you. This is, I like to get it super. Now if I do this, it's just barely letting any graphite come off.
I have activated charcoal tablets. How would that powder be comparable to this?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
You have to try it. You have to try it. You know what? You might find out that there's something in activated charcoal that works better than anything anybody else has ever tried.
Yeah, you got to try it out.
You just
Experiment. The only reason
you might have said that as a joke or not, but there are a lot of people that suggest things for fun that I actually try after we get off because I'm like, I wonder what it would do. I've actually used that hand sanitizer that's that gel alcohol. Mm-hmm. It works fine. It evaporates. Eventually it just goes away. But
Grr dog, someone's trying to give him a hairless cat. Oh, I'd take the hairless cat if they're giving it.
If somebody's going to give you one, sure, take it. I think they're cool. I'd
be able to have a cat, though.
I would be looking at the thing all the time because it looks. The skin on hairless cats is just these beautiful wrinkles, and they they're. But then again, I collect mummified animals, so that's the ones that you find in the woods that have been there for years and stuff like that.
Yes.
But all right, so this is usually where I'll
take it
over there.
Ampersand clayboard.
Yeah, but you also have to make sure you clean off the edges because that's going to go on your desk, and if there's any graphite stuck to the edge, it'll definitely come off in the worst possible place it can. So, and then make sure there's none on the back of it, which this one doesn't have much on the back because I didn't use a ton of graphite. I left it pretty light.
Monica asked if you tried different inks on the board besides the powdered graphite.
Inks work like ink on anything else. It's just difficult to remove. This board is made specifically for doing like scratch board. So if you put ink on it, you're going to probably want to remove it more like you would like if you did scratch board technique. So see how light it is now? But see, I can still see all of the bits and pieces that were in there are still there. They're just super light now. And the value range is compressed and closer to what is this, maybe 40% gray maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
30 or 40% gray. Mm-hmm. So, and then now that I wear gloves, I don't have to go wash my hands. But we're gonna go over there and I'll show you one that's at the next stage where I start finding stuff, which I started this one at the demo we did in Atlanta. We did a demo. It's like a 3-hour demo at Dragon Con this year. Mm-hmm. So, and that's the one that I have over here.
Remember, this will be up under the stories, so if you missed the first part, it was just powdered graphite, and this is just water and the powdered graphite. So you can see the first part under the waters, and he has generals mixed with Cretacolor, both of them in there. All right, now we go over here. Sorry, I have to not kill myself. You'd think that I would have a chair. All right.
So I bought a bunch of these little skulls from Anatomy Tools, and I keep them in different places to use for reference when I'm doing like bony pieces like the one up above. Mm-hmm. This is something I started working on. I'm actually thinking of it for an EDO. I drew this out to see where I would do the figure if it were a large piece, but it's actually going to be a small horizontal piece. It's like right here.
Very cool.
So I'm only covering this part up because it's just drawing part that it isn't going to be in the finish. But,
very cool.
So this is the same kind of board with everything that I just did, except that I think I took it to a darker. I used more graphite on it and didn't polish it off as much as I did the other one. Actually I did. I polished off all the graphite. It's just that I let there be a lot more graphite on the board to begin with. So a lot of this stuff will come out if you get like when I was talking about the Mr. Clean Magic erasers. I use them. This one's got dog hair on it. But if you take them when they're dry, you can sort of almost do a soft erase on the thing, and you could lighten up entire areas and sections of the board.
But look, if I put my hand on it, then nothing will come off, right?
Yeah, nothing comes off.
See, that's how.
It's still just graphite.
A little bit.
Well, that's probably from what I just did like earlier with the Mr. Clean Magic eraser. There's always a little bit, right? But it's
Until
not
you
enough that it
seal
really,
it.
yeah, until you seal it. And so where I bring out like super highlights like that, I end up using, I use this, which is just a piece of steel wool. And you can, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do with this yet, but if you make, you can draw like a lot of striated lines with steel wool and just, but it gives you a texture more like looking through scratched glass, you know. And I made a, where's it at? I made a small one.
That's so bright you can't see you can barely see the scratches.
Yeah, in reality, this actually isn't. I mean, it's sort of when you turned it to the side, it looked more. That's, yeah, it's closer, but it's there with my finger in it. You can see it better.
Yeah,
it's got a better contrast. That's actually more representation of what it looks like in reality.
Yeah.
So, and normally I'll use a 6B. The ones that seem to draw on it the best are the 6B Caran dash lead. I have to see which one of these I have that actually has one in it. Here it is.
All of them
There.
have nothing in them.
Well, I just put these back in here.
Oh, okay.
Because I cleaned up. See?
I know.
It's all kind of organized and clean now.
It's a little scary.
You don't see these much anymore. I think these might be even the antiques in terms of art supplies. These are the drafting dots that they used to make, where you could put your paper on a board and tape it up with this stuff. And I don't even think they make it anymore. I might be wrong.
What am I going to use a drafting dot for?
Well, just to hold paper in place when you're doing something.
Oh, there's Stadler drafting dot.
Which, I mean, you can use any tape for it, but they actually sold drafting dots, which is funny.
Don't put a drafting dot on you.
Oh, okay. So
what do you have there? That's a...
It's a Kohinoor lead holder, and the lead is actually
Wait, it's not moving.
I think it's put out by Cretacolor, but it's called Hardmouth. I'm not sure. I'm getting some of these mixed up with each other. This is Hardmouth as well, but I'll have to pull it out. But Cretacolor makes a lead that's 6B 5.2 millimeter, which is what this basically is.
Do some lead holders hold the leads more secure than others?
They're pretty standard. The only ones that are like super stiff are the old antique ones, the lead locks that I have over here. Let's see. These things you can get sometimes on eBay. They're usually around $20 to $30, and they're 2 millimeter, the 2 millimeter leads, and they are extremely tight. Like it takes, this one doesn't have any lead in it, but it takes like actual thumb strength to push it down, and it holds it like it doesn't move.
See the pile of Series 7 table?
Oh yeah, these are just waiting.
Waiting.
Yeah, so you can see that it, you can let's see this, like okay, like right here.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do this and then I'll go back into it. As you can tell, a great majority of the drawing happens with a kneaded eraser. Just because.
Well, that, and there's a lot. I think some people are under the impression that a lot of it happens in that first pass with the powdered graphite.
Well, that's where some of the directional lines and things come from. But then I have to put them together, which this is still pretty abstract at this point. But I have to find an organization to them and a hierarchy that makes sense as an image, whether it's going to be abstract or if it's actually going to be something representational.
Someone asked if this was a dragon.
It definitely could be. I have yet to get to a point where I'm committed to what it actually is. Right now, I was using this when I did it as a sort of an element that I was bringing into a piece I was working on for something else. That I scanned this part of it in and used it for something. And now I kind of want to go back and finish this and see what it's going to become. But it could definitely be a dragon. I haven't done a lot of dragons recently. I used to do dragons all the time. But see, the kneaded eraser will take things up in probably the easiest way to take it up. But like I said, it'll get dirty to a point, and you'll find you're just kind of pushing graphite around. But you can actually make it. You can do a drawing with this. It ends up looking so smooth that bits of it look airbrushed, or even like a painting.
How long have you been working on this?
This probably, I wouldn't say more than like 5 or 6 hours so far. All this was actually in the actual graphite when I laid it down. This was that reticulation I was talking about that looks like it was in the other, but I just I erased a lot, or I blew out a lot of it when I polished it and just brought it back here.
And you did the eye. It wasn't that bright there, right?
Oh no, there wasn't even a circle. There was no circular shape there. I just decided that I was going to start from that point, and that it was going to be an eye shape, and turn it. But you know, like I said, this on screen looks so white that it blows out. Yeah. But in reality, that's probably a 5 or 6, maybe 10% gray.
Oh yeah, the height.
You know, if you look at it,
center of it.
If you look at it, just compared to like even a piece of paper, it's not as white as a piece of paper, even close. But it looks, when you take it out and you look at it based on the way your eye sees contrast, it starts to glow a little bit.
What are the hardnesses of leads you use on it?
I tend to stay with very soft leads. From probably the hardest I would go would be 4B, but usually 6B to 10B, because I'll use the Mitsubishis on this quite a bit, which I'm actually almost running out of Mitsubishi leads.
What?
I only have 3.
Always. He buys them by the dozen.
Yeah.
How did you get this kind of concept or inspiration?
If you're talking about specifically for this piece, it sort of grew out of that Rorschachian element that this technique tends to lend itself to. For other things, like some of the imperfections that I do that are actually based more on like photography that I do for myself, those I have to kind of plan before I start, and then I have to have a line drawing so I have something to put on the board after I get the texture down.
Anya says, I have a problem with repetition of pattern when I'm rendering a texture. What helps you keep it random?
That's actually a pretty standard, I think, problem to have, and I have it sometimes myself. I just become aware of it and go back and change things. Like if this started to appear too much, too pattern oriented, I have to go back myself and I look at it and I see it and recognize it and go back and change it. It's just part of the process of the way that we think is when we're drawing things, we tend to fall back into patterns. Like I tend to draw shapes that you've drawn before, or you tend to draw, if you're making up figures, you tend to make up the same kind of figures over and over again. Mm-hmm. You're lucky if you make up like super interesting dynamic poses, and that's just in your nature. Me, I have to go back and make sure that I'm not just reproducing a figure that I just did like a week ago or something. If I'm doing something, because I especially when you're drawing based on your own ability to see patterns and things, you tend to like with this technique, I tend to see things like skeletal, and I tend to see like, I don't know, almost intestinal type details and things. Mm-hmm. Whereas other people might see something and define it more like tree roots or the patterns of leaves.
Right.
When Vaughn did it, Timothy, Von Art, mm-hmm. when he did it, he actually had his stuff. Mine looks a little bit chaotic compared to what he did. This technique, he did a piece that had all of these very graceful loops and things in it, just like his normal work is very graceful. He brought that into the piece and saw that in it. And
you remember Dominique's piece too.
Yeah, and Dominique did that.
Trees.
Yeah.
Had a lot of trees showing up in it.
Right.
A while back, you mentioned putting something on the drawing to lessen the shine of the graphite. What was that?
Oh, when I'm finished with it, if I do a drawing and I don't want there to be a graphite shine to it, I'll first spray fix it with a matte fixative, and then I'll put it's a matte acrylic varnish that is basically a paint that I use an airbrush and spray on top of it. But you have to make sure you're working on the kind of paper that's not going to buckle if you do that. So when I do that, I tend to work on a heavy paper, whether it's Strathmore watercolor paper or an illustration board that's made for, that's also
always experiment. Just
and if you do it, and I use the Liquitex Ultra Matte Medium, like thinned with water a little bit through an airbrush, and I can do that on pretty thin paper because it's coming out of an airbrush, and it'll completely destroy the gloss on a piece. But remember that when you destroy the gloss in a drawing, it changes the value structure that you've laid out. Yeah. So you have to be okay with that, or willing to work back into it after you've done that. Like with a matte medium, there's a tooth once you're done. It doesn't have a gloss surface, it has a matte surface. So there's a tooth, and you can take like a matte, like either a black, very thin colored pencil, or some of the like the Nero blacks, Cretacolor black Nero, or you can use a little bit of gouache and Tickle Blacks and bring them back.
Yeah, but there was one time that you did a piece, put the matte varnish on it, and then...
If I did it on this, if I put matte varnish on this, much of the detail that you already see would disappear. And it's traumatic when it happens. But I figured out after I did that on one piece, I did it and it's like half the drawing seemed like it disappeared. I played with it for a bit and then I was like, well, if it's messed up, it's messed up. Let's experiment. So then I put an acrylic gloss on top of that and it all came back.
It all came back.
So it was really funny. It was almost like, it was almost like a magic trick.
Someone asked if they could make their own clayboard.
Do not know. I don't know how to do it. You might be able to. I have experimented with making my own, with gesso that I just polished to a near plate finish, and it works. It just works a little bit differently, and you'll find out unless you're very good at the craftsmanship. Which I know people that can make gessoed board that you can look at it from the side and it looks like looking at a sheet of glass. I don't know how to do that. I don't have all the tools to do that. So when I do it, there's still pitting and stuff in it, which I did that on the war piece that was in my show. And the pitting actually worked out well because I work back into it and use that as part of the piece. Yeah. But you can do it. You may even be able to make clayboard, but you'd have to research it because I've never tried.
Jay Hatcher says, the clayboard seemed to not easily accept the pencil in areas I erased. Should I use a softer lead? The soft lead is really, and sometimes it has, I know this, working
Vicky,
with a 10B right now.
Yeah, sometimes Vicky makes fun of me, but sometimes it'll not accept it on one day, and then you come back the next day, and for whatever reason, and the only thing I can think of is humidity, will change the surface of the board a little bit, and it'll work the next day, because I've had the exact same thing happen. And basically it happens because when you erase, if you erase too much, and I say too much, meaning that when you erase down back to the white, it'll polish the surface of the board to a finish that won't accept graphite as well. So, I'm not kidding when I say it's not the easiest technique in the world to use, but the thing is that it's because it's not that easy that it has these different results than you would get from the easier techniques.
Yes, and it is not easy for him all the time because there is a blank board that apparently he got pissed off at one night and he flung it out into the backyard. And since we were trimming bushes and I was like, oh, there's the board that was... Yeah,
I got irritated one night and took a piece of the clay board I was working on and just threw it in my backyard.
So he threw it in the backyard and it hit a bush and went underneath there until we found it.
So normally what I would do if I wasn't that pissed off is that I would take the Mr. Clean Magic eraser and set it under a tap and just clean it. You can take the board back to completely white. Yes. And again, you have to let it really dry to do, you dry it off and then you work back into it. And I guess one of the things that I got used to was surfing the parts of the process that are more difficult. I got used to coming into contact, like at any given point, something I try on this piece may not work. And I'll either figure out how to make it work or adapt to whatever's going on. So it's definitely one of those things that you want to know from the beginning that it's going to fight you at some point. But the thing is that most pieces of art will fight you at some point. There's always that ugly stage things go through. And once you get used to kind of living in that uncomfortable spot where you go, oh, this really isn't working. If I push it and if I let it, if I keep going with it and learn how to adapt to it or learn how to overcome it, either one works. I'll end up getting something out of it that I want.
Okay. It is 9:50, but we started late, I think.
Yeah, we started like at least 5 minutes late. So.
Reynolds Illustration was asking about scanning of graphite pieces and... because it's so difficult to... He works... Once the piece is scanned, it's not just done. Right. After it's scanned in, he'll work with several hours on it.
Correcting it. Yeah.
Correcting it to get rid of certain areas and things like that.
It will serve you well if you realize that the scan is a different thing than the drawing and that you will never reach 100% of what the drawing looks like. So what you do is get it as close as you can and then put the drawing away and then work on the print and say, how can I make the print the best that it can be out of the context of the drawing? And that's really what you have, with graphite. It's really, there may be there are people probably that have studied their entire lives to get perfect corrected scans of things.
Yeah, but that's not what, when you're buying the original, you get the original.
Yeah.
And the print will look, we get it as close as we can.
I was once told that the fact that you can't reproduce exactly a drawing or a painting in a print is what in part makes the original worth so much. Is because it will never be completely reproduced. So what like what I do is I try to make the print look as good as I possibly can. And to be honest, there have been times when the contrast of the print ends up looking a little better in some ways than the drawing, but the drawing has a different quality to it. You know what I mean?
You can
so
see,
it's not so much
some
better.
of the details.
Yeah, it's not better, but different. It's one of those relinquishing of control things, I think, a little bit, because you have to let go of the idea that you're going to get 100% and say, I'm going to get 80 or 90% as close as I can, and then see what I can do to make it just look as good as I can on that, in the end. Unless, like I said, you might be one of those people that find a way to do it earlier, but it does require work. I mean, obviously you probably know that already because you probably tried. I just did when I first bought a scanner and a computer system to bring my work into a digital workflow. I also bought like 5 to 10 different books about Photoshop and color correcting and all that, and essentially taught myself what printers used to do in terms of color correcting for offset lithography.
Oh my god!
So I could do pretty well for somebody who didn't actually spend 10 years doing it.
Oh my god! No, you could do it perfectly.
I could get pretty close. We used to print, because we'd have large printers and we would print for other people.
Yes.
And I could get pretty close, but it wasn't easy, and sometimes you don't have the option of spending 3 months learning how to do something or more.
Yes. All right. Hey, our website is AllenWilliamsStudio.com, and it's a new website, so some newer pieces are up there this week. I try to ship out every Friday or Monday. This will stay up under our stories if you didn't see the first part.
I'm going to grab the one that has the face in it so we can see that.
Okay.
Okay, more realistic.
This will stay up under the stories for a day, and then it will go up on Patreon this week. And then we'll open it up to the public, and it'll eventually go up. Our Patreon is patreon.com/AllenWilliams. And then our YouTube channel is Allen Williams Studio.
So this is this she posted recently, but this is one where I was more controlled with what I wanted out of it. And, it just takes time to get to it. And what I ended up doing was doing a line drawing and then projecting the line drawing onto the board. Exactly where I wanted everything, and then tracing my image onto it, and then going back and working with it until it did what I wanted it to. So, but you can go. You're pointed at the corner, I think. Right?
No,
oh, there you go. Okay. Oh, you're centered. Okay. But you can go, as far with realism as you want to go with it. Basically, I just like it because you can. This is what I was talking about a low key drawing. Because it's basically just the highlights of things, little areas and stuff, and it's dark. And this is what it looks like when you use an electric eraser to erase back to white. So relatively speaking, it's pretty white. I mean, it's probably still just a little bit gray, but let's see, put my hand in it.
Yeah.
It's pretty white,
But you can actually see you can see where you use the
the steel wool.
The steel wool around it. Mm-hmm.
So this was a piece that went up for EDO, and the person couldn't
bought it and then couldn't.
They couldn't take it, so it's still up there.
Yes, if you're looking, it's on everydayoriginal.com.
So and I just wanted to say this is a year from now probably, but I'm doing another magic card, and I'm going to document the entire process in video, and we're going to get that up as soon as I'm able to show it.
Is this glossed? This has
the spray finish on top of it, which you can, if you look at it from the side, it kind of it makes the surface uniform, but it also makes it, all this was the same value as this before I put the spray on it, and now it's a little darker, you can tell. It makes the darks a little bit darker. So.
They like the live stream.
Oh.
They're saying thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Everybody's saying thank you.
You're very, very welcome. So.
Yeah, Ellen has a bunch of magic cards.
So,
Oh.
This is something I've been doing lately. I got these Post-its that are like on the natural like paper, and so I've been doing like sketches and things on that.
Because finding a regular sheet of paper with your great writing on it isn't hard enough. Now you put it on Post-its for me.
Yeah, but these are just ideas.
I know, but I'll go where you'll go. Where was that one? And I'll go. Oh no, we can't find the Post-it. Don't throw the Post-it away. And this is the one he's working. Someone said they had troubles drawing the little hairs.
Hairs.
Smallest. I think that's right. Probably just your smallest.
Oh.
Most delicate thing. I guess that's just.
That has that. You know that I have trouble drawing everything on here. So. It's like I like to, you know, it's all a struggle to get it to look like what I want it to look like. So the drawing of that fine line that you're talking about, I can see that, and I've had it happen. I have to try it again to see what I would do to overcome it if it were
well,
resisting.
I'm not sure if they were talking about on the clay-board or just on your paper.
Oh, well, yeah, that has to do with playing with the super sharp pencils and stuff. You know,
Yeah, the soft leads though still, right?
Yeah, well, I use really soft lids because the thing is if you use a soft lid and you draw from the side, to me that erase is really easy. Mm-hmm. Once you get to a point like that, wouldn't erase very easy because I've worn it down and pushed it more into the paper. But like the sketch down here that you can barely see, that'll all erase pretty well if I want it to. That's actually not even going to be in the piece, but it's going to be that.
He's pretty cool.
Thanks. This is more of a study for another piece that I've described to Vicki. She knows it, but I don't really talk about it until I get it to a point. There's this old phrase that you know, I don't know if there's a phrase for it or not, but there's a theory that if you talk too much about an idea, you diminish the intensity at which you proceed with it. Mm-hmm. And they used to call it spillage. I think is when you talk about something, you're spilling little bits of it out instead of saving it all and doing it all at once.
You know, we have done that over the years.
I find that there's things that I've talked about that have never seemed to happen after I talked, but other things did. Yeah. You know, other things happened I think because I talked about them. So I think it just depends on whether or not you're apt to do it anyway. But
could be. Here, I'll move her.
So.
Yes. All right.
So yeah, I mean, these, like I said, this one would be dark. The one that I have over there that we just did, I'll probably try working up a lighter key drawing with that one, and maybe in a couple of weeks we'll bring that one out when we're doing a video.
Sure.
So, but.
And Bliss says maybe the energy goes into the talking and not the drawing.
You know, I think that's part of it. I think you diffuse it. It starts to you get a feedback from just having the idea instead of from making the idea, which I think, you know, it's a big thing. So
lots of people like to talk about it.
That's true. And I tell you that one of the things that changed for me was when I stopped telling myself that when I looked at somebody's work and I said, oh, I could do that, or I could do this. When I stopped doing that and I started being determined to say, I am doing this, that's when a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do started happening. Mm. When I stopped saying I could and started saying I am. You know, I don't know if that's oversimplification or not, but it's a small thing in your mind, a little switch that can trip. So this is actually a sketch for a piece that it looks like nothing. It was actually a sketch for another piece that I saw abstractly as something else, and now it's going to turn into this. I don't know if you can even see it or not, but it's more of a quadrupedal creature thing. But that's what the sketch looks like. It almost looks like I sneezed when I was holding the pencil.
Stop.
So.
Oh, any progress on getting our Twitch set up?
You know,
we have to pick a day and just do it.
Right now, it's less about progress in terms of getting it set up and more about just starting to make a habit of it.
Yes, we have to pick a day.
Yeah.
Should be in the middle of the day.
Probably in the middle of the week, you mean?
Yes, or day.
You said pick a day. It should be in the middle of the day. So which one is it? Pick a day or be in the middle of the day?
Those are two separate things.
Yeah.
Pick a day, comma, and pick a... I should have put a conjunction in there. Okay. Conjunction. His mind is very full. All this stuff goes in. Everybody asks, where do you get the ideas? It all goes in there, and then he pulls stuff up from the 1980s.
Well,
there was this movie I saw in the 80s, and it goes with this book. And if you think about this piece that I was doing, it works in this. And I go, how do you even? I don't remember a movie from 2 years ago, let alone the one from '82.
So, well, it's just a thing. I mean, I have a visual memory for one thing.
It's like it just gushes around in your brain.
I had a
Cooks
professional artist once tell me I started talking to him about an idea I had,
Oh.
and he said stop, and I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I don't want you to tell me your idea," and I was like, "Why?" And he goes, "Because I won't mean to, but it'll roll around in my head and it'll come back out, and it might be exactly what you're talking about, it might not." But don't take the chance. And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's
So
you're
and he was
exactly-
I'm not gonna call him out, but he was a well-known professional artist.
Yeah,
who
and
just,
he's true though.
he was just being honest about it, because you see things that you like, and very much of what you do comes from something that you've seen at some point in your life that you noticed and you paid attention to and you liked and dwelt upon, and so it comes back out in a different way. And it's just that's the nature of things, is that you might try to reproduce something that you only half remember, but in reproducing it, you've changed it. You know.
They asked how you did the eyeball. The eyeball is the electric eraser at the center, and then
Yeah.
steel wool around the outside.
Right. Mostly it was the steel wool, and I did the steel wool part first, and then pointed the electric eraser at the very, very center of it, which
Just there you go. Now you can see.
and
it
you can see it.
for some reason.
That's a better representation of it. But and then I just went back in with pencil and tickled it until it fell into the more solid 3-dimensional kind of shape that it is. Mm-hmm. What's fun about this stuff is that you can find the highlights of something and really start with a 3-dimensional image quickly. If you figure out if you learn to find your highlights and not the highest highlights, but the surface. If you learn the higher parts of the surface and render from that right away, it's easier to find a dimensional shape. Because your mind is used to seeing black and white photography, and you can pick it out without having to define what's in the black.
Yeah.
Which is like in that other piece, the EDO piece, the face.
Yes.
I mostly just pulled out the higher highlight parts of it, and that actually happened pretty quickly.
Yes, we will pick a day for Twitch and just.
What's the best day for Twitch? Is there?
I don't know. We'll have to do a poll. Is there a best day for Twitch? I don't know.
So I wonder when most people tend to have the time to view it. So one of the things that can happen, and I noticed this, is
they're asking where your electric eraser is too. They want to see an electric eraser.
This is a Sakura. These are the best ones you can buy. They're usually anywhere from $30 to $60, depending on where you get them.
Move my finger so I can.
They're more powerful than the Alvin electric erasers, but the Alvins will work. Don't let that stop you.
Yes.
Alvins usually are around $10 or $15, and I think those will work just fine. With the white erasers, not the abrasive erasers will work too, but they'll do something different.
Experimentation, people.
Yep, experiment. And then these kinds of hard erasers, these abrasive erasers. This is an antique, but you can get Faber-Castell still makes a new version of it. The ones with the white erasers, not the pink ones. The pink ones can sometimes leave a pink on the board. So you want the white ones. And those you're basically just pulling off a little bit at a time. Tiny little bits. You have to
clean that eraser a lot, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then the other one is the Tombow Mono Zeros. Tombow Mono Zero. It's named the same thing as the pencil.
Yeah, the pencils he likes are Tombow Mono 100s.
And the zeros are the erasers. But these will pull up like real, pinpoint lines. They have to be really clean when you do it, though. Or you're basically just pushing more graphite into it.
The board is ampersand clay board.
I don't know if you can see that or not.
Mm-hmm. You can see it.
So you can pull a fine line with that. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. I mean, you could probably spend a few months just experimenting with the board and getting comfortable with it. I don't know how much are these boards.
They're like $2 to.
The smaller ones are not very expensive. They're like $2 a piece, maybe.
Yeah, $2 or $4.
I know
they're like $2.
Expense is a relative thing, but relatively speaking, in terms of art materials, a $2 board that you can experiment on it more than once if you're willing, or you might get what you like out of the experimentation.
Well, we're wrapping it up here since I think we started about 10 after. So you guys have a good week, and I'll try to announce on the story or something if we're going live on Twitch or when we're going live, or during Instagram, and we got a crap load of new people.
Oh, yeah?
Like, yeah, Instagram has been blowing up, so we appreciate it. If you're new here, then awesome. Can't wait to get more questions and talk to you more. Look, we did the full hour.
Yep, 28 seconds remaining.
All right, you guys have a good week. Enjoy. Draw something.
Yeah,
paint something.
10 minutes a day if you can afford it. We'll
All
get
right.
you. We'll get you pretty far if you do it every day.
Say goodbye.
Goodbye.